Hey everyone, so this is just a quick video on how labs in earth science and chemistry are converted into final test questions. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of, in general, what we see and then give an example for each course. So in general, lab questions are going to discuss, what were the variables? You could be asked what was the independent, dependent variable, or constant used in a specific lab, so make sure you review those. Sometimes you're asked to utilize an equation that was used in the lab. So for example, chemistry students in our calorimeter lab, we found the value of Q, so you may be asked to do that again. Sometimes you're asked to define how an object is used. In earth science, it could be an object we used from our toolkit, or it could be one that we made, such as a sundial we made, a barometer we made. In chemistry, we made our calorimeter. So it's possible that it's a question about something that you've created, or like for instance in our titration lab, it could be a discussion about the process. Some questions are taken directly from the lab, so look back through the questions following the data tables and get a feel then for how those questions could be worded on the test. And the best way to do that is to look at previous tests or old quizzes, go back through those and get a feel for how are those lab questions put into an exam format, especially on the part 2 portions of these exams. All right, so to give you a quick snapshot of the labs we've completed this semester for each of these 2 courses, feel free to take a screenshot here, but make sure you pull each one of these out and take a skim through each. Make sure you know the variables and understand the processes in general. Earth science, we covered everything from forming a cloud in a bottle to looking at the difference of heat capacity of water in soil, to discussing the temperature, salinity, density differences that create deep ocean currents. We looked at the moon's phases and sunrise and sunset, and finally discussed air pollution. In chemistry, we explored the gas laws, each and every one of them in a single lab. We looked at different ways that solutions form. We looked at different sizes of salt versus different temperatures of water. We did a titration with our acids and bases. We created a calorimeter. We electroplated. We're going to explore our organic molecule kit here pretty soon. We're calculating half-life. So these are the labs to kind of take a quick glance over before you open your final exam. All right, I'll give you one example then with earth science and one with chemistry here quickly as we look at how these labs are actually converted to questions. I'll show you multiple choice and short response. So in earth science, I pulled the 1.13 lab, which was our soil versus water lab. And for this lab, we heated soil and we heated water, and we looked at which absorbed energy and released it slower versus quicker. So the takeaways from this lab were on specific heat capacity of each substance and the differential heating process on Earth. So recall those and look at your data table, explore the ways that those were answered, and then looking here at the questions from the lab, there's one that discussed how Earth's surface is heated due to sun's radiation differently. Think poles versus equator, think tilt, think direct angle of sunlight. And then there was another question that said, how does this experiment help explain why it's often milder in areas such as coastal Maryland versus Kansas or Iowa? So these were lots of questions on the unit test, and I'm going to show you an example of pulling this into a final test question. Okay, so here on the left is a multiple choice version of that. The temperate climate of coastal communities is due large in part by which one of the following? So this looks just like the question 4 on the previous slide. Is it due to the high specific heat capacity of water, the high albedo of land, upper atmospheric wind patterns, or proximity to the equator? So this lab was the lab that told us that coastal communities maintain this nice temperate climate, not too cold, not too warm, because water really retains heat and releases it slowly. So the answer to this would be letter A. That in a short response question looks like here on the right. Explain why it is often the case that coastal communities have a more temperate climate over Midwestern communities. So here you would be discussing the specific heat capacity of water, because specific heat was the answer to that question. It was brought back on the unit test, and it was kind of our go-to term that we discussed for this portion of this lab. Okay, so that's an example for earth science. For chemistry, I pulled our 4.03 calorimeter lab. Here's the lab table we collected as we were slowly trying to work through the calculation of Q and then enthalpy of fusion. And then your lab questions itself following that asked you to calculate Q, and then we divided by